We have this Comanche, and we've gotten our drivetrain, which is an LS3 E-Rod from GM, but it came from Turnkey Engine Supply. They've set us up with an entire kit to put into the car. Right now, Kendall has already mounted and drilled a few holes and tapped a few inserts that had no threads, which we found kind of odd. These are the Novak adapters. We put the mounts in. Now we're going to get the LS up in the air on the hoist. We're going to put on the motor mounts. We're going to slam it in here and see how it fits with all of the suspension before we take out the axles to rebuild them and replace the rear with a Dana 44. So we're going to go ahead and do this. We took the 4-liter out of this yesterday. Was that yesterday, Kendall? Took it out yesterday. It drove in here. It's out. We got rid of all the old wiring. We're going to use an American Auto Wire Highway 19 harness. It'll do everything we need to do. It's a pretty simple truck. Although it does have options for power windows and power seat, we're not going to be using them on this sucker. So we've got a bed full of parts back there, including the radiator mounts. We have a transmission on its way and an adapter to a NP231J. We're going to get started on this. I'm going to put this in the center hole just so that we know we have a little bit of room forward or aft in the truck when it comes down to it. You went middle? Yeah, I went middle on mine. When we get it floating over the car, we'll grab the rubbers, polyurethanes. We're gonna take off our masking tape here, and we're gonna put on the factory manifolds that have to run with this to be California legal. As you can see here, brand new motor. I mean, it hasn't even been run yet. It's from GM. Turnkey will usually run these engines before we get them. I'm not so sure that Colby ran this one. The E-rods are their own deal. Everything has to be set up perfect. You can't put a tune in the computer. When I say you can't put a tune in the computer, legally you can't put it in the computer, but also physically, I've tried to change anything in there when I don't care that it's an E-rod, or to use a computer here, and without tissing it and changing the VIN number on it, which I'm assuming what has to happen, you cannot get into that computer and do anything. So this will come here. This will be the first time it fired up, but it's an entire package from General Motors. So it should be pretty good. We've done a couple of these. The last one we did was in a FJ60, 1984. It worked out great. You gotta be careful. The catalytic converters come out as if they're in a car. And you're not supposed to move the distance of the catalytic converter from the manifold flange here. From the manifold flange, the distance to the catalytic converter can't change. Now, we have gotten them through smog by twisting them a little bit. We'll cut the welds, twist them, and there's some of the worst welds on the catalytic converters come with these. We have a few sets. We'll, if we find a bad weld on it, that's GM doing that. So you can go and have an exhaust shop, twist them yourself. You just have to make sure they stay in the same location. Oxygen sensor ports stay in the same location so that monitoring and everything, all the monitors in the computer recognize what they're looking at. Another great tip for these E-rod motors, when you get into the air intake, in the instructions, they used to say, and I haven't read them recently, that to use a 4-inch OD tube for the air intake. The problem is they don't mention the wall thickness of that tube, and they're supposed to be 3 3/4 ID because it's a metered orifice. So 1/8 inch, 4-inch aluminum tube is what you want to use for your air intake if you're welding a bung in. If you're not, you need to find something that is a 4-inch tube to put the blade into. You cannot do any MAF corrections, MAF scaling to the computer to get these to run right, and you have to be within 20% for your short-term and long-terms added together in order for it to run the monitors and not fail. And we're trying to pass smog, so check engine light can't happen. In any other state, do what you want. This particular customer wants to drive this truck all over the place, do a little bit of what he considers to be overlanding, probably a one-night camping trip, and do a little bit of four-wheeling. He doesn't need anything super strong. We're gonna put some chromoly axles in the front. I think he's more gonna be going camping with it and trying to daily drive it around town. And who am I to get in the way of his dreams? So we're gonna make this legal. It seems like most people around here don't like to touch the California legal stuff. It can be a pain. There's a lot of stuff you gotta go through, contact the ref. They have a list of stuff they want to make sure you've done before you show up, so you don't show up and you're trying to fix stuff on the dyno. They have very limited time for all of this. Hold on a second. I don't think that these engines come pre-harnessed. I know this is turnkey harnessing this for us. Anytime you do a harness, if you put the harness on before it goes in the car, which I highly suggest, you just want to make sure when you're putting the transmission in that you don't pinch anything in here. I mean, if it's not going all the way flush right away, you either got something wrong. Either your converter's not seated or you have something in the way. It's better to take it in and out 4 times than put it in once and destroy something you can't repair. Or you can repair, but you got to spend 10 times longer. Sometimes you've got to take your time, right, Kendall? Always want to make sure that your coil packs are grounded to the head. These are a little hidden, but they are on the head right down here. But this front accessory drive, I think it's Camaro, really puts this out to the side and it's very shallow. We're going to need that for the Comanche. The Comanche is very, not necessarily short. There was a 4-liter in there, but not made for the width. So it's got to come up and out. And this customer would also like to, in the future, have air conditioning, which poses a problem we'll see later. And I've only seen it in XJs from John Wood doing over at Woods Off-Road, but the air intake tube will have nowhere to go off the front of the motor if you block both sides with something. On this side, we have the alternator and the power steering reservoir. On the passenger side, we have, if we put an AC compressor high with an ICT billet mount or something like that, it can get in the way. So we may have to take it over to my buddy Richard, and he can make an ovalized or a crimp tube to go around it. But we have to make sure that our mass airflow sensor, we're not moving the air inside that 3 3/4 inch ID tube. You don't want it on the outside of the tube. You want the sensor in the center of the air. And when we do get this fired up and going, I'll put it on HP tuners and we'll watch it. And I'll show you what I'm looking for. The better the air intake is, the better the placement of the mass airflow sensor. When you can't change mass airflow scaling, the better it will idle and perform. And also we need to keep that check engine light off in this particular instance. Every car is a little different. Every air intake's a little different. When you're using a GM computer, you usually have to tune them, but we don't get that luxury here. One trick we've done for years, you know, the heads are symmetrical. They can be put on either side, but the water port is here and it's got a metric 12 thread in it, I believe it's 12. In order to get an 1/8 inch pipe style aftermarket sending unit in there, there's a couple ways to go about it. XRP, I believe, maybe it's Earl's. I'll pull one out later, makes a stainless one that'll go in there. The aluminum ones and brass ones are just so thin on the inside that they usually break off. You can put them in there, I've used them, but you just gotta be real gentle on them. And then the other option is take a 1/4 NPT tap, and you can just tap right into threads. You don't have to drill it, you don't have to get rid of the old threads, you don't have to plug it, none of that. You can just throw the tap in there, don't go too far, you know, hopefully, you know, acquaint yourself with doing pipe threads. And then you can use a 1/4 inch pipe bung to whatever size sender you have. You know, usually they're 1/4 and on up. In older instances, like the international scouts that we do, sometimes they're 1/2 inch. And some old Chevrolets are on the side of the cylinder heads, big block, stuff like that. 1/2 inch is just too big to go in here. There's a couple ways you can do it. You can get on the internet to a parts house and eliminate kind of ohm rating and get the ratings off of them and find something that was the same. More often than not, you can find a sensor that's 1/8 pipe, 1/4 pipe, and 1/2 pipe, but they all have the same resistance inside them. So I've kind of made cheat sheets and written them on my wall over the years. I can't seem to find them. I probably put a sign over or something.
It's neither. Speed flow.
So speed flow. Oh yeah, we get this locally. This is a speed flow bung. I don't know if that's too close there, but that's 1/8 pipe. M12 thread, and it's got a little sealing washer. You got to use that sealing washer, and it'll go right in over here. Do you want to put it in right now before we get started, or?
Yeah, put it in right now.
This plug right here. So we'll take this out. I think that's a 7 or an 8. All right, 15 millimeter, but just a little tight. Bam, we're on there. Now we can put an 1/8 sender in there. We're gonna be probably running Speed Hut or Dakota Digital gauges. We haven't decided yet. We're trying to figure out what's going on with the dash. We took it out yesterday along with almost everything out of the truck.
I gotta pull my.
What I'm doing here is I'm just gonna surface this. I'm gonna make a little knurl knob. We're gonna use to lock down the computer. I'll come down, center drill this. I'm gonna tap it for 1032. Then I'm gonna work it down to a 1/4 inch to fit in the slot and reach down to where there's a bolt coming through the other side so we can lock it down. I'm gonna put a little knurl on there so we can just thumb turn it. We don't have to put a wrench on there or create our own nut. All right, so we've got our bolt sticking up and we've got our thumb wheel that we just made. Let's get those threads started. Bam. And now we've utilized the factory bracket that's locking down on this trans controller and then one already threaded nut. Let me turn over here. Right here that we put a 1032 bolt through. So now we're flush mounted. Kendall's mounted this computer on the bracket. It's gonna go in the dash. And this is our main ECU. This is an E-rod, so we have a separate trans controller. And the separate trans controller needs a CAN bus wired in here. Maybe a few more things. We'll touch on that when we get there. That's the hard part of this. Looks like he's gonna probably go back over to the lathe and make some spacers to go in there to space these off a little bit so we're not putting pressure on the bottom pan of that ECU right there. All right, so we took a little break. We undercoated this car. So we'll put it up in the air. I'll show you kind of what we did. We were in the middle of it and it just looked, everything was so clean from the fresh paint to the engine bay, and we took out the interior. We spent a little time beautifying before we put everything together in here. Kendall has started to mount the Hydro Boost. This is a Hydro Boost off of, I believe, a 93 Astrovan, new from, you know, O'Finally's or Vattozone or whoever you're using to get your parts from. It's an Astrovan, but this is the earlier Astrovan. Yeah, I think usually they run 93 to 95. This might be a 92 Astrovan Hydro Boost. On the back side, it has a rod. It's 3/8 rod with an eyelet on it. It's not adjustable. We'll go inside and we'll show you kind of the pedal's way too high. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut off the eyelet. We're going to thread the shaft to 3/8 24. Then we're going to put a female threaded 3/8 rod end on it and attach it to the pedal. So that way we can adjust our pedal height and get it right. Other than that, Corvette master cylinder 78, anything but 83 with disc brakes, right? Because 83, they didn't make a Corvette. This is the fuse panel. Kendall, we went and bought these brackets from Summit. I'll try to find the part number for them and include them on here. This attaches to the factory lock. And then there's, we put 2 of them. We've only got the top one mounted. We're in the middle of just landing this guy here. Where the old fuse panel for the body harness used to come through. As you can see down in here, if you get up here, Jake, the wiring harness put through there, we still need to loom that. But this is our front lighting wiring harness and our engine wiring harness because we're wiring this truck with an American Auto Wire Highway 19 currently. You don't have to do that. The wiring was bad in here. This guy wants this truck to be running and good forever. I'd hate to be chasing lights and brakes and reverse lights later on if we can just get everything done now. So, engine's mounted. I know we watched the engine get mounted. We've mounted the engine. We're going to put it up in the air. I'll show you the undercoating that we did. We started to run our wiring harness. We put our computer inside the cabin. We'll show you that's not necessary. It can be mounted on the fender well, on the firewall, anywhere that it's in the engine bay, but not above direct heat, like say the exhaust manifolds. So we just kind of mocked this all in here. I'll put it up and we'll show you kind of what we got going on. We're also working on AC compressor and we'll show that from the bottom. So we sprayed some undercoating on this, which actually technically isn't undercoating. We just cleaned it up real quick. There wasn't a bunch, took the dirt off of it. This is actually Raptor bed liner. I think you get it from Harbor Freight, maybe. We get it from the local paint supply place. We undercoated everything in the tunnel. If Jake follows me around here. So everything in the tunnel is nice and undercoated, nothing stuck to it. Dirt will stick to this good later, but we wanted to use a bed liner so we could pressure wash it off, being that this will be taken off-road. Jake, if you turn around up here, you can see we got plenty of clearance for our exhaust manifold. And now looking back at it, we probably didn't have to trim that. But The sealing surface is still good. I put the gasket up there, looked at it. If you want to look over on this side, Jake, we got our pockets in there that we were working on. Still plenty of room. Probably could have cleared it. I mean, it's nice to have some clearance, but maybe that could have been straighter in a different angle. Not going to kill it. It's a 2003 Camaro exhaust manifold. We get them for pretty much dirt cheap to practically free around here. All the LS3s come with them in a kit, and we tend to run headers if it's a Camaro or something. And we're not going for, this isn't a show car. We're just making sure this thing is easy to pressure wash and keep looking nice over the years. He's going to daily drive this. We got to readjust the motor mounts just a hair. We just need to loosen them. We kind of plopped it in here. So you see a little tilt here. That'll get fixed before it leaves. This is a Novak adapter for the NP231J that's in here. It's just got an upside down Chevy energy suspension mount on it. It came with the bracket, not the mount. I forget what that is. 43004.301G or something like that. But the average, it's at every AutoZone, O'Reilly's, Napa, everywhere you go. So the adapter's on here. We've got the transfer case mounted. And everything's back where it is. Believe it or not, this cross member is in factory position right now. And all we had to do, I think they took video of it, was open up some holes to accept the hardware, I think on the bracket on the top for the mount, because it takes 7/16 hardware in it. And it had 3/8 bolt holes. It already has a slip yoke eliminator on it. That's the way the customer brought it to us. The transfer case has been gone through, rebuilt. It's got some of that fresh Sierra gear silicone that comes in every kit. It's a 231J with a 272 low. We will not be using this speed input. However, on the howl for the computer, so we don't pop a check engine light for slip and trans or anything like that, we need to figure a way to tell it that we put the shifter, maybe with a micro switch, into low gear. And when it's in low gear, it'll calculate, we'll go into the computer. Well, I think in the computer, it's already calculated out to 2.72 to 1. We can go in and change that in the TCU because we're running a separate TCU from ECU. But when we get to that point, we'll get into all the technical jargon. We're over here. We're looking for a place to mount our charcoal canister. They're pretty easy to mount. They do make, this is not an uncommon style charcoal canister. They make a mount for this you can get out of the junkyards. I forget the last one maybe came out of a 98 Chevy truck or Suburban. We'll go down, we'll just look at it and, oh, that's the one. And then it clips over the top bottom and gives you a way to bolt it in. So you're not trying to make straps to hold it down, but that's not too hard. But you need this to be California legal. This captures all the fumes coming off the tank, and then it'll suck the fumes that are bonded to the exterior of the charcoal that's in here. When you suck air through it, it'll go back into the intake in the purge valve and burn it so that we're not smelling fumes. It's a California thing, tree huggers. Other than that, everything under here is looking pretty good. This rear end's going to go away. The owner has already rebuilt Dana 44. So we'll get this out of here and get this thing all together. Start getting ready to get into wiring and plumbing and figuring out the exhaust and drive shaft lengths.